Hello, everyone. I'm pleased to introduce this session on Gender-Based Analysis Plus in the context of the Opportunities Fund program. This program is led by the Employment and Social Development Canada members who will be presenting today. Jessica Stark will start this presentation. Jessica is a policy officer in ESDC. She is committed to strengthening gender-based analysis plus capacity of the Opportunities Fund and other skills and employment programs to better measure, monitor, and address gender disparity and promote access of underrepresented groups across skills programs. Renata Sharkey will be the next presenter. Renata is a senior policy analyst in ESDC. She is dedicated to increasing the participation of persons with disabilities in the workforce. 3 more members will then join the Q&A session. Khaddouj Souaid, who is the manager in ESDC, Thomas Bergbusch, who is the senior policy analyst in ESDC, and Lynn Deshin, who is the manager in ESDC. This will be a special Q&A session today that will not only include the speakers answering your questions, but the speakers also have a few questions to everyone who is attending this session. Jessica, Renata, Khaddouj, Thomas, and Lynn are inviting you to provide your ideas and comments on the following questions, and feel free to type your comments and ideas in the Q&A box, chat, or raise your hand if you would like to speak to respond to these questions. The first question is, from your experience, what are the key barriers faced by persons with disabilities in accessing labor market programs? The next question, how can the Opportunities Fund work better to address these challenges faced by persons with disabilities? The next one, how can reporting be improved so that it's more meaningful for the program users? Also, the speakers would like to discuss with you how to make sure that women equally benefit from labor market programs compared to men. And finally, the speakers will appreciate if you can share some of the things that your organization is doing to support gender and diversity lens. We thank you in advance for your active participation in the Q&A session. And now is the time for the presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are very pleased to be here at the 2020 Disability Hour Conference to discuss Gender-Based Analysis Plus in the context of our Opportunities Fund program. Before jumping into our presentation, we would like to extend a huge thank you to the organizers for inviting us to participate. My name is Jessica Stark, and I will be beginning the presentation by providing an overview of Gender-Based Analysis Plus. Gender-Based Analysis Plus, what is GBA Plus, you might ask? The government of Canada has been committed to using Gender-Based Analysis Plus, acronym GBA Plus, in the development of policies, programs, and legislation since 1995. GBA Plus is an intersectional analytical process that is used to assess the potential impacts of our policy, programs, and services on the diverse groups of Canadians that we serve. It involves examining disaggregated data and research, and then considering all relevant social, economic, and cultural conditions and norms when assessing the data in the development, implementation, and evaluation processes of our programs. The plus of GBA Plus is rooted on the recognition that Canadians have a multitude of intersecting identities that go beyond sex and gender. As such, GBA Plus considers these identity factors and the intersection between these varying factors and how that influences an individual's perception of and experience in accessing and using government programming. Furthermore, Canadians experience different barriers to employment, education, and training based on these intersecting identities. So the plus of GBA Plus also recognizes that These identity factors are dynamic and are socially constructed. These identity factors do not operate in isolation and are interconnected to one another. And no single aspect of identity is any more important than the other. So to act as guidance for GPA+, Women and Gender Equality Canada, acronym WAGE or WAGE, has created the following diagram that is displayed on the slide. The diagram illustrates the key intersecting identity factors that should be taken into consideration when conducting GPA+. So included in this diagram, we have gender and sex at the center. Then we have race, ethnicity, age, disability, religion, geography, culture, income, sexual orientation, and education. I want to note quickly that these barriers act as a baseline rather than a conclusive list of everything that needs to be considered in GPA+. And in fact, some identity factors are more relevant to some programs than others. So GPA+ is important for a variety of reasons. I will give a quick outline of some of the key ones. First, it supports evidence-based decision-making by involving the critical analysis of disaggregate data from a variety of different sources. These sources include our program administrative data and feedback provided by our partners and stakeholders, Statistics Canada reports, as well as academic research and external reports. So all these different forms of data is included in all stages of the policy process, from policy development to policy implementation, evaluation, and of course, reporting to Canadians. GPA+ also helps us to identify and address the differential impacts our programs have on different groups of Canadians. This includes positive and negative impacts, intended and unintended impacts, direct and indirect impacts. Essentially, not everybody benefits equally from a program. So GPA+ helps us to dissect the impacts of our programs and identify how each group is affected by the policy differently. Applying these lens helps to provide us with evidence on what is working and where mitigation measures are necessary to address any negative or unintended consequences. GPA+ also helps us to understand and respond to historical and existing inequalities faced by different demographic groups. Systemic barriers and inequalities affect different populations differently. And it is really important and helpful for us to unpack these barriers and to better understand them so that we can better respond to them to our greatest capacity in our policies and programs. And on a similar lens, GPA+ contributes to inclusive programming that is responsive to compounded disadvantages. This is because it is a method that helps us to better understand how these intersecting identities create compound disadvantages and the impacts of these compound disadvantages have on Canadians. And then the last primary benefit I want to touch upon, that is more so in a skills and employment context, is that GPA helps us to identify opportunities to leverage untapped potential to strengthen our economy. As you are well aware, the Canadian economy is not benefiting everyone equally, and these inequalities have exuberated quite significantly as a result of the economic impacts of the pandemic. So optimizing the economic potential of all Canadians, especially those who are currently struggling to participate and who are underrepresented and underemployed in the economy. This is a critical lever for achieving inclusive economic growth. It will bring in significant returns to the Canadian economy while helping to significantly reduce levels of poverty. So in order to better serve the diverse needs of Canadians, these different labor market outcomes should be taken into consideration as part of the development, implementation, and monitoring of our programs. So this slide, I want to provide you with a historic overview of the origins of GPA+. As mentioned, the Government of Canada has been committed to using GPA+ since 1995. However, GPA+ has evolved significantly since then. So I will begin with the United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing that took place in 1995. At this conference, the government of Canada committed to implementing GPA Plus throughout its departments and agencies through the development of the Beijing Declaration. And at the time, this analysis was to guide decision makers in informing them of any potential impacts policies and programs may have on gender. It didn't touch upon these other intersectional factors at that point. However, the fall of 2015 reports on the Auditor General of Canada helped to advance the incorporation of GPA Plus in the governments of Canada. So this report was titled Implementing Gender-Based Analysis. And it pointed to the need to do more to fully implement GPA Plus as a rigorous process across the government. The Auditor General report provided recommendations relating to how to adjust barriers to better implement GPA Plus, how to assess and report on the progress of implementing GPA Plus, and how to access resources to deliver and expand on a GPA Plus mandate. So in response to this report, the Government of Canada has created an action plan. And as part of this action plan, this is taking us to 2018, where the Gender Budgeting Act received royal assent. So the Gender Budgeting Act affirmed the government's commitment to gender and diversity budgeting by ensuring gender and diversity considerations are integrated within the budget and resource allocation decisions. Also, that the gender and diversity impacts of these policies that resulted from these resource decisions were made available to the public so that the progress can be measured publicly. The same year, the Gender Results Framework, acronym GRF, was released. This is a whole of government framework that represents the government's vision for equality and inclusion. Under this framework, the government identified key areas where change is required to advance gender equality. So this slide outlines the pillars and the subsequent goals of the Gender Results Framework. I will just read off the 6 goals starting from the top left corner. We have education and skills development, economic participation and prosperity, leadership and democratic participation, gender equality around the world, gender-based violence and access to justice, and poverty reduction, health, and well-being. So each goal contains a series of performance indicators, and the progress of these performance indicators are being tracked by the Gender and Diversity and Inclusion Statistics Hub, launched by Statistics Canada. Many of these indicators align with international frameworks, such as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I also want to add here that although many indicators right now are related to gender equality, WAGE is working to broaden these performance measures to encompass intersecting identity factors such as disability, gender identity, sexual orientation, indigenous identity, immigrant status, and visible minority status. I also want to contextualize this framework in the context of the Opportunities Fund and just note that the Opportunities Fund aligns under the first 2 pillars that I mentioned. So as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, GPA Plus is informed by various sources of data and evidence. However, above all, learning about the outcomes and experiences that Canadians face while using our programs is critical to improving our ability to conduct robust GPA Plus, and therefore it is also critical to our ability to deliver inclusive, responsive, and accessible programming. My colleague will touch upon the importance of working together in the context of the Opportunities Fund. But for the purpose of this slide, I really wanted to emphasize how the information collected from Canadians improves our ability to conduct GPA Plus. And as this diagram illustrates, many of the benefits of GPA Plus that I discussed earlier in the deck are enhanced by working in partnership with you. So I look forward to working in partnership with you to enhance our GPA Plus. At this point, I will pass it on to my colleague Renata to discuss GBA Plus in the context of the Opportunities Fund.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you again to the organizers for having us here at the conference. I'll also be joined in a few minutes by my colleagues Khaddouj Souaid and Thomas Bergbusch. So in moving on to just a bit of background about the program. So next to the workforce development agreements, the Opportunities Fund represents the Government of Canada's second largest source of targeted employment supports for persons with disabilities. This program was initially established in 1997 and designed to fill a gap in federal supports for Canadians with disabilities who are not eligible for employment insurance program or training support. The Opportunities Fund has an annual funding envelope of approximately $40 million and funds organizations to assist persons with disabilities to prepare for, obtain, and maintain employment or self-employment. It's a unique program because it offers employment-focused interventions to specifically reach persons with disabilities with little or no attachment to the labor market. The Opportunities Fund program provides comprehensive supports to persons with disabilities to help improve their integration in the labor market. So these include, for example, skills training, job placements, and wage subsidies to encourage employers to hire persons with disabilities. It also provides supports to employers through matching services that connect them with the person with a disability and to help employers develop and implement effective recruitment and retention strategies. So national and regional projects are delivered through contribution agreements with third-party service providers. Persons with disabilities are those who self-identify as having a permanent physical or mental impairment restricting their performance of disabilities daily activities. So the eligible recipients to the program include not-for-profit organizations, municipal governments and Indigenous organizations, for-profit organizations, provincial and territorial governments, institutions, agencies, and crown corporations, and employers. So the program is composed of two streams. Under the Working with Employers stream, this funds projects that aim to raise awareness of the benefits of hiring persons with disabilities and that help employers create inclusive workplaces. The projects provide persons with disabilities with work experience and training to help them develop employment-related skills. The projects also engage employers to help them create conditions for successful work placements. The types of activities and services under working with participants can include basic to advanced skills for employment. So this can include up to 6 months of training, work experience placement with employers, which may be subsidized, self-employment, which is supporting economic independence of persons with disabilities. The fourth is enhanced employment assistance, and this can include, for example, counseling, job search assistance, and resumes, and developing resumes. Enhanced employer support, so this is helping employers to hire and retain persons with disabilities, and supporting employers in creating successful work placements. So under the second stream, Working with Employers stream, these projects aim to raise awareness of the benefits of hiring persons with disabilities and that help employers create inclusive workplaces. Activities under this stream range from providing employer awareness through changing perceptions and dispelling myths, and enhanced employer support, which provides direct support to employers. So for example, to improve human resource capacities, connecting employers and persons with disabilities. So the program examines results using a gender-based analysis lens, including intersections between gender, disability, Indigenous status, visible minority status, and geographical location. As participants begin their interventions, GBA Plus data is collected. Organizations submit this data to Employment and Social Development Canada on a quarterly basis, which allows us to segregate the data by demographic characteristics. As program outputs and results become available, this data helps to analyze outcomes for persons with disabilities and other underrepresented groups in the labor market. Monitoring and implementation. The interventions and supports funded under the Opportunities Fund program are made available to all eligible clients, including men and women with various intersecting identities. All Opportunities Fund funding recipients report detailed client-level information for each person served in the participant information forms. These are completed by participants, which include demographic characteristics related to gender, so male, female, or other, age, Indigenous status and groups, so if they're registered on reserve, registered off reserve, non-status, Métis or Inuit, if they're a member of a visible minority, and a new immigrant to Canada. And we consider a new immigrant to Canada anyone who's been in Canada for less than 5 years. So, however, with that said, the ability to generate GBA plus analysis is challenged in the program due to the requirement that demographic information collected in participant forms, such as gender and ethnicity, is gathered on a voluntary basis by participants. So this has resulted in a high percentage, almost 40%, of non-responses towards demographic information. So, and this in turn has caused demographic data to be skewed to only those who responded. So with respect to the diversity profile of participants in the Opportunities Fund projects, it varies from year to year. However, on average, the program serves 4,316 persons with disabilities annually. So in 2018 and 2019, the average program participants who self-declared as male was 57% compared to 41% for females. This only marginally changed in 2019-2020, where males represented 56% of participating clients compared to 42% for females. Overall, the administrative data is telling us that the program is serving more men compared to women. In addition, increased income is relatively larger for men compared to women. This is interesting to note because in comparison to the Canadian population of persons with disabilities, representation of women with disabilities is higher at 55% in comparison to men at 45%, as per the results from the Canadian Study on Disability. So this program is tailored to the needs of working-aged persons with disabilities under 21 to 55 years and over. However, some age groups, such as youth, benefit more from the program due to their limited attachment to the labor market, which affects their eligibility to access employment insurance support measures. In 2018-19, youth between the ages of 15 to 30 represented 55% of the total participants served. So 23% were under 21 and 32% were between the ages of 21 and 30, compared to 35% for those aged between 31 to 54 and 10% for those 55 years and older. Again, only marginal differences were seen in 2019-20, with youth between the ages of 15 to 30 representing 58% of the total participants served, compared to 33% for those aged between 31 to 54 and 8% for those 55 years and older. Program participants also comprised of self-identified members of a visible minority group. Based on those who self-identified, visible minority representation averages approximately 21% nationally. So in 2018-19, of the clients served, visible minority clients represented 21% of the total participants served. This only marginally changed in 2019-2020, with 19% of the Opportunities Fund clients who identified themselves as visible minority. So just in looking at the trends in participation rates by types of disabilities self-declared, so the types of disabilities self-declared by participants served during the 2018-19 fiscal year, so mental health being at the highest at 35%, developmental and intellectual disabilities at 16%, learning disabilities at 12%, agility at 6%, motor skills at 4%, hearing was 2%, visual 2% as well, Speaking was 1%, and those who did not self-declare was 20%. These numbers remain consistent in 2019-2020, with a slight increase of participants who reported mental health up to 36% in 2019-2020. So just in taking a quick look and overview at the outcome of the highlights. So of the 4,242 persons with disabilities served in the program in 2019-20, 1,554 clients found employment, 294 clients returned to school, 2,804 clients enhanced their employability, meaning they improved their employability skills. From what we know, additional data will be released in the upcoming evaluation in spring 2021. So while the evaluation of the program is not yet completed, preliminary results do indicate that the program impacts and earnings for men were higher compared to women with disabilities. Overall, previous evidence of benefits from program participation across all interventions indicates participants gained development of transferable workplace and essential skills and soft skills, improvement of overall well-being, attitudes, behaviors, and motivation, increase in self-esteem, pride, self-confidence, and sense of self-worth, and networking opportunities, and decreased social isolation and stigmatization. So in just looking at a few of the challenges and how we can find opportunities to turn these challenges into areas for opportunities under the program. So I discussed a little bit regarding some of the challenges around GBA plus data collection activities under the program. But we also, can identify prospects for all partners to seize these challenges as opportunities to work together to improve responses to the participant forums and ultimately to better supporting outcomes for participants in the program. As a quick recap, we discussed the challenge of generating GBA plus analysis under the program due to the requirement that demographic information collected in participant forums, such as gender and ethnicity, are gathered on a voluntary basis by participants. So this has resulted in a high percentage, approximately 40%, of non-responses towards demographic information. And this has also caused the demographic information, the demographic data to be skewed to those who only responded. So in addition to this, it's also compounded with the consideration that we need to reduce reporting. We recognize that we do need to reduce a reporting burden on organizations. So combined, these challenges may have in the long term impacts on data interpretation. So when moving forward and looking at ways we can leverage these challenges, we have an opportunity to work together to capture the work done by organizations and to have an impact on underrepresented groups. We have an opportunity to work with our partners to take a deeper dive at better understanding issues of intersectionality. And lastly, working together, we have an opportunity to raise awareness of the importance of GBA plus and improve capacity to measure, monitor, and respond. For example, we can look at broadening categories for reporting on diversity, including such as different racial and ethnic groups, to tailor services and provide high-quality, client-centered interventions to Opportunities Fund participants. So in moving forward, we want to seize the opportunities we just outlined and put them into practice with you today by gaining your feedback on how to increase responses to the participant forums, work with you to make reporting more meaningful and responsive for you and government's needs. And we want to seek your feedback on how to increase participation of women and those with intersecting identities in the program and reduce any barriers to participation. At this point, we would like to open the floor for discussion questions and answer any other questions, ideas, or comments you may have.